Viewers, listeners, welcome to not only just another episode of Blighty Talks Bricks, but the opener of Season 3. My guest today is somebody that I've known for 30 plus years. Millions of people in the UK would know him as Grant Mitchell from EastEnders. I think it'd be fair to say many other millions would know him as the man that actually goes to the most dangerous places in the world. And then when he gets there, that's not enough. He then goes to talk to them and ask them and promise. He's obviously a bit strange. My guest today is the amazing Ross Kemp. Ross, welcome to Blighty Talks Bricks.
I love it,
How
Blighty.
are you?
I'm just like really impressed by you just there. That was really good. He's not using autocue or anything. He's very, very good. I'm surprised. No, I'm not. Do you know what? I have known this man for 30 plus years, and we've had a lot of fun along the way. We've seen a lot of things happen to both our lives along the way. And I love the fact that you're doing this. You're very good at it.
Well, let me just say thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
And one of the things that I do for my guests, just so we clear something up, you don't get paid. One of the things that I do for my guests is to try and find some sort of connection with them. And trust me, viewers, I don't wander around in this regularly. This is my Cheshunt Rugby Club blazer. But it is a connection between us because not so long ago I was at a lunch there and your name was mentioned. And it was mentioned very nicely. It was mentioned how good a rugby player you were. You were at the time, playing at Brentwood.
Yeah.
And you played against Cheshunt. And you were actually good at it. You also played for the county. You also had a few run-outs for Saracens.
That's right, yeah, I was there for a little bit. No, I used to play against Cheshunt then as well, because the second and the third teams, because I was predominantly in those at Saris, between, I'm going to say, 80 to 85. I was in the under-21s and then got too old to play there. And I wasn't really good enough to make it into the first. But played, the odd game. I was predominantly in the seconds. We played Cheshunt first team because they're a very, very good side and still are a very good side.
Yeah, it's changed. I think it's moved around, but you're absolutely right. Cheshunt were back in the day particularly strong.
Yeah.
But those days are long past both of us, I think, in terms of rugby.
Yeah. I sometimes think that I'm going to go out and play for the local side in their vets, and I tinker with the idea of going down to JD Sports and buying myself a pair of boots, and I soon talked myself out of it when I remember the last time I played, I was trying to get my head off the pillow and I couldn't. It took me 10 minutes Sunday morning just to get out of bed. So yeah.
No, I think there comes a time in certain sports. I think football's one and rugby's another to say enough's enough. Yeah. Talking about enough's enough, I've just finished this.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I loved it.
Really?
I'm being. I expected to love it. I expected to.
You are a friend,
but I did. I love the title. Take nothing for granted. There was lots of things in there that shocked me. There was some very funny things. I remember you talking to me when you were starting to make the book, and you using the book about chronological order, and that's I'm the same. And you said that you went back to where you used to live in Rainham. And you said at the time, you said, I wanted to go back there. That was going to get my mind going to, because it takes a lot to put into a book. It's not an easy thing. People talk about it. It's not an easy thing to do. But I remember telling me the experience you had there.
True story. I mean, the book doesn't work in chronological order, but I wanted to go back and chronicalise parts of my life so I knew then that I could bring in different aspects of my life at different times, but make sure that I got the basic facts of where I was at that time correctly. So basically, it doesn't start off that I was born in Barking and now I live in Berkshire. It's all over the place.
Jumps around, but you
a
wanted
bit like
to
my
get,
life.
But you wanted to get so you got it down right.
Yeah, and I went back to Abbott's Close to Rainham, which had changed significantly. I mean, it was pretty tough where I was growing up. It's a lot tougher now, I think. And it was outside the front of the house. It's a semi-detached, 3-bedroom, 1960s built, red brick house. And the door opens and this woman goes, "You Ross Kemp?" And I went, "Yeah." expecting, why don't you come
Come
in and have a
tea, go and look
chocolate
at my
biscuit and a
bedroom."
cup of tea? Well, I wanted, that was the plan. I mean, I was hoping that she went, your dad was a copper, wasn't he? Fuck off.
Well, you told me at the
Which
time.
is probably at the time. And also, when I was growing up at school, it wasn't something that you advertised. Do you know what I mean? It's something that you kept quiet about. I mean, times have changed, but yeah, it wasn't easy growing up having. It wasn't easy growing up having a dad who was, in the CID.
No, very different. Well, yeah, very different times now. But I could get that. As I say, there was a couple of things in there that the emotions of it for me. You talk about your time in EastEnders.
Yep. Really important for me, I have to say. I mean, you knew me through that. We've got a good mutual friend, Andy, as well, that was all part of it.
Who's actually sitting out there watching us.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go into a show in those days, and I'm talking in those days because it's not the same now.
Well, you used to have 20 million people watch you on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and then maybe more of that when they did the repeat on a Sunday.
Yeah, the omnibus on the Sunday. And so you're not getting paid sports stars or pop stars wages, but you're getting that kind of exposure, and that can turn your head. And I, undoubtedly was a bit of a twit for a number of years.
Maybe we'll come back to that. But I remember with you and I and Andy, you mentioned, it was Andy that introduced me to you. Can't believe it was 30 odd years ago. Mm-hmm. But we'd played golf. We'd gone into the town to get some food. And I remember being in this pizza restaurant with you. And this was before mobile phones per se, before selfies, before you get people come up and shake your hand or actually wanted an autograph. Yeah. I mean, when was
or to take a swing at me sometimes.
Well, that was a lot to do with your character. But then going back, it was about 20 minutes before you could actually sit down with us. And while we was having pizza, I just remember it like it was yesterday. Two guys came over and shook your hand, and one of them said, "I just want to thank you for your service to the parachute regiment."
I know.
These people actually believe that the person you was on EastEnders, that was your real life.
You spent, if you think about it, it was 7 days a week, really, because even if the day you weren't there on the Sunday or the Saturday, because sometimes we film Sundays, sometimes we filmed all the way through, you spent more time with your non-real family than you did with your real family. Yeah. And you were probably in character for most of that time. So, the difference between when I took the leather jacket off, the trademark Grant Mitchell jacket off, that was sort of now you got to be Ross now. And then when I came into wardrobe and put it on, that's when you're going to become Grant now. But I look back on it very fondly. There are a lot of people who are in soaps, Blighty, who leave them and become very successful and would like to forget the fact that they were ever in one. A, it would be very difficult for me to pretend that I wasn't, but B, also, I'm incredibly proud of it. It gave me a heck of a lot. It helped me get on the housing market, get some red bricks. It helped me, have a great time. I mean, you look at me, the way I look, I wouldn't have been so lucky in terms of the amount of attractive people that I bumped into had it not been for the fact that I was on television in front of 20 million people. So there are many things that I have to thank for it, but the biggest thing I have to thank for it was that it was really good. It was good to be part of. It had a great following at the time. It still does. And it was a platform that I used, the notoriety that gave me, to go into making documentaries.
Well, one of my questions I was going to ask you, and it leads me nicely into it, is do you think you played a hard man? I mean, sadly, you and I look a little bit similar. We're both a little bit stocky, both a little bit bald.
A little bit.
Do you played that hard man? Do you think that some ways might have stopped your acting career in another way? Because you then, dare I say it, stereotyped.
Yeah, I think we like to pigeonhole people in this country. I think it's changed a little bit, but I still think it's there. I still think there's a class system in this country that likes to stereotype people and pigeonhole them. You know, and no doubt, I know in your game there are certain people who probably, even no matter how successful you are, which you are very, you know, still probably not necessarily invite Steve over the weekend to meet the parents, you know, or the uncles and aunties, or the wife. And I think that still exists. I don't think that's ever held you back. I think it hasn't held me back. But yeah, undoubtedly, I think if you're going to play a character that was that well known in that way, then it is going to narrow your options when you leave. But the fact is, I went to drama school for 3 years. I did an apprenticeship. And it wasn't like you could just go and get an apprenticeship. You had to audition.
Yeah.
And I think there were 13 places and there were 14,000 applicants. Something ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And then you had to get a grant. And this was in the time when, you know, the arts were being less funded. Well, probably as less funded as they are now. It was a very difficult time for the arts because of the government of the day. And, you know, by hook or crook, I managed to get in. And
Talent, that's called, by the way.
yeah, but I think with all the way, I mean, and I think you probably agree with me, there's also has to be an element of luck of being in the right place at the right time. It's being in the right place at the right time is one thing. Realising you are in the right place at the right time is the kind of ace on that.
One of my old golfing chums, who sadly, you know, is no longer with us, but he always said, when we were playing golf, you make your own luck. And you did that. So moving on, because there's lots, and I genuinely mean this, the stories in this book are unbelievable. And I know you've tried to make them funny, but there are some serious bits in there. When you came to the end of EastEnders, 1999, was there, because, you know, I did know, but lots of people didn't know that once upon a time you was in Emmerdale. So when the end of EastEnders come, did you then sit there and think, shit, what am I going to do? Or was it, actually, do you know what? I've got a really bright idea. I'm going to go to Afghanistan and be shot at.
Well, no, because what happened...
That didn't sound very bright to me, by the way.
No, well, what actually happened was I got asked to go to ITV. So it was a really hard call for me, because I had a very good relationship there with not only, you know, the actors, but also with the staff there and the bosses there. But ITV offered me, you know, an offer I couldn't refuse, basically, financially, and for me to go and play different parts. So I did that for 4 years. And while I was doing that, as I point out in the book, in the middle of working, you know, having done 10 years straight, virtually working every other day or every day, I suddenly stepped in, because no one wanted to do a documentary about America's infatuation, obsession with firearms, you know, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And in the process of making that, I bump into Bloodhound, who was a young black guy who told me, well, I was told before I met him that he'd been shot 24 times. And this is still, you can see this on YouTube. I'm not making it up. So I think it's called Lethal Attraction. And he had been shot 24 times. At one point, they put the gun under his chin, pulled the trigger, took the end of his tongue off. He travelled up through his nasal passage and split the front of his skull. And he made me put my hands, I'll never forget, put my hands in the front of his, he lifted his bandana up, because in those days, the Bloods and the Crips carry colours, hence the film colours. And you could feel where the skull had been parted, and he'd taken 6 9mm in his chest. He'd had hollow points. He'd been shot in the nuts, and he said it swelled up to the size of a grapefruit. and also the point about it, this was Blighty. This was Essex, white Essex lad with black Compton lad. Not very much in common in terms of growing up or what we've been exposed to culturally, but we hit it off. And when I walked away from that interview, I couldn't help thinking that, you know, all the glamour that I was seeing on MTV and other, because the internet was in its infancy. There was no kind of big, all the glamour that we were seeing from the rappers was all about, you know, get rich quick or die trying. It was before 50 Cent had come along, to be honest. But it was all about the glam, about the cars, about the gold-plated braces. I mean, not these ones. I mean, the ones that go on your teeth, and the good-looking women. When the reality was fear, poverty, angst, a short life. I think then the average age of someone in a gang in Compton or Heath, the two biggest notorious areas at the time that has changed, you know, but if you joined a gang at 16, by 18, there was a 70% chance you wouldn't be around. And if you weren't around, you'd be in prison.
So did that start your passion with this desire to go to these terrible places and talk to these?
Well, then again, you say they're terrible. Are they terrible? I think that's the point about it. I think what the desire was to create understanding, I think. And I enjoyed the excitement, don't get me wrong.
Okay, well, that's a question. You actually enjoyed, because these, I'm saying not nice people, I've never met them, but they don't necessarily all come across as being...
Well, some of them aren't. I mean, they're
mentally stable.
Some of them aren't, and some of them are under the influence of street drugs or alcohol or both. And you just have to judge that, and you get better at judging it the more you do it, like in any job. But I suppose the thing about gangs was that gangs are not a new phenomena, you know. Robin Hood was in a gang, whether he existed or not, we don't think he did. But Dick Turpin was in a sort of gang, you know. Teach, Blackbeard was in a gang.
Yeah, gangs have always been part of life.
Yeah, people have always grouped together to defend themselves or to obtain things that they believe should be theirs, but they haven't had by birthright or for whatever reason, protection, to be cool. I mean, that's the worst thing you ever hear. Is I'm in a prison somewhere, wherever it may be in the world, and I've heard it, whether it be in Colombia, whether it be in Eastern Europe, whether it be in North America or Britain. Why'd you join a gang? To get girls. Well, you're doing 25 years, you aren't going to see many girls.
Not now, no.
You may have a boyfriend, but you ain't going to get a girlfriend for a long time. You know, so that's the saddest thing about a lot of it. And I suppose the reasoning behind it was, yes, it was exciting to travel around the world. Don't get me wrong. I went to some bizarre East Timor. I mean, I never even heard of the place. I remember I flew out there on my own. And I had to stop over in Bali, which sounds like it's a romantic night. They put me into an Islamic hotel, so I was dying for a beer, no beer. They took me out to the back garden, which was a rice paddy, and they gave me a bird's egg, what was it called? Pina colada, with a straw in it. And like you eat the straw, but it's like, I don't know, plastic worms. Yeah. And I was getting munched by mosquitoes. I went to bed because I knew I had to get on a UN flight out of Bali into East Timor, across the South Seas. And I woke up to see the television bouncing towards, television, they open the door up and they've got like a drawer.
Yeah, pull it out, yeah. The
doors had opened because we were in the middle of an earthquake, and I saw the TV bouncing towards me and just drop and then smoke and spark. And that was my wake-up call. And like, I've been sort of living in this dream world of living in studios, living either in a dressing room, living in a fake world, and trying to create that fake world and make it look real. All of a sudden, I was in a very real world. And when we went to East Timor, we had the wrong stock. So we had in those days, I've been through it all. I started on film, then I went to tape, and then we went to DVDs, and now we're on cards, and no doubt you'll just be doing that soon, and that'll be the camera. Yeah. And we got the wrong VHSs sent out, so it took 3 weeks for the new ones to come out because we're so far away. Mate, I just lost it. I used to go for a run every day down the beach, and I remember Maurizio, our fixer, saying, because I'd be like, just go off. It was either that or sit in the bar, and I just knew that was not going to end well. Not that I didn't do that occasionally, but I remember laying down. I was like, it's like all these kind of reeds on this beach, and I was just laying there on my own after going for like a good 1.5, 2 miles, and it's pretty hot. It was like 35 degrees there. And Maurizio goes, he stops. He had a Suzuki Jeep with an open top. Remember those old Suzuki Jeeps? I do, yeah. And he goes, Ross, get out of the water, get out of the water. And I'm going, I'm all right, mate. It's just lovely. It's been fun. He said, you're on Snake Beach. And what I'd taken to be reeds were actually sea snakes. So, yeah. I've made a few mistakes along the way, mate. I mean,
just going back, there's a couple of things. I mean, one of them I watched when it first came out, when you was in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And you're going through the fields. and then all of a sudden this thing fizzes past your ear. I would shit myself.
Yeah, and you do sort of, the first time I remember being in a proper ambush was when I went out with Ron Anglians the first time, and you're expecting it to happen. They used to use this thing called tethered goat. That was the theory. So basically, if you tether a goat to trap a lion that's eating your goats or eating your village, you tether the goat and you make a ring around it with acacia or whatever the bramble of choice is in your area, or thorned plant or tree is, and you leave an entrance. So when it goes in, you close it off, you set fire to it, and therefore you take out the goat, but you take out the lion. And so the idea was for infantry companies to go out on the ground, get into an L-shaped ambush, generally like that. So they fire, you get into that point, and so they're not shooting each other, they're shooting across at you. And we would know that we were walking into one. And then once we got into that position, the officer in charge, the OC, would call in air assets or call in artillery and work out where they were and help take them out, or draw in other companies to come around and capture them or kill them. But once you're in your first ambush, after the first past your ear, you could get into 8 contacts before 8 o'clock in the morning. Because there's nothing to lie in for, trust me. You get up early.
Well, I'd be lying. I'd do the cleaning for it, so it was clean when you came back. So
but yeah, you got human beings. One thing you do know, and I think you know this as well, that human beings are incredibly adaptable. You know, I don't think I could work in an A&E. I don't think I could work in a hospice. But if I had to, I think I could, and I would. I'd take a particular kind of person to be able to do it very well, I have to say. I don't think I'd be very good at it. But, you know, I was there with 18-year-old boys who trained for this, and we were all like a little bit, wow, this is
But there's also another difference. I mean, you reference something in the book where, you know, you're within sort of 25, 30 metres of the enemy. And then the old army, you know, bayonets.
Fixed bayonets, yeah.
Yeah, fixed bayonets. But you didn't have a bayonet, but equally you didn't have anything to put it on either.
No, exactly. But that is when they are the moments when you do get twitchy, because you hear that rattle, because an SA-80, obviously, the bayonet comes out, fixed bayonets, and it comes down the line. And that is as old as, you know. And
so you're looking around, you think, this was a really good idea you had, Ross, to actually be, you know, come and do this documentary.
At that point, you are literally the point of the bayonet. At that point, you are thinking, I make all those promises that you do, like every man has ever done or every woman has ever done who's been in that kind of near-death experience, depending on how long that near-death experience goes on for, that I will be good when I get home. I will never do those bad things again. Right. Please, power above me, just see me through these next 30, 40, 50, whatever minutes it may be, this 1 second. But then those things happen on a more regular occurrence, and they become normal. So, you know, you look at, you know, the people right now as we're speaking, there'll be somebody cutting someone out of a car, you know, not far from where we are, you know, and that's a horrific thing to have to do, but he's doing it or she's doing it to save that person's life. And the more they do it, the more they become accustomed to it.
Just one more thing on that, because I do want to get...
So there is a PTSD aspect to it.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about Blighty Talks Bricks in a minute, because I know you've got an interest in it. But the other thing is, when you say you got better at this, and I did watch yesterday the YouTube version of it, when the guy has got the gun point and he says, "You're going to kill me." I know what you say, you get better at it, but it looked to me that those guys were totally off their head on whatever they were eating or smoking, or probably both.
Both, yeah.
That, to me, seems weird.
That was in Papua New Guinea. It was in the Highlands. Nothing has sadly changed there. They're still, sadly, raping and killing each other and allegedly eating bits of each other after they kill each other. Yeah, there was no option there, because we were so far away from anyone that would have done anything to have helped us in the first place, even if they could. So
attack was the best form of defence.
That is totally what you're not trained in a hostile environment situation to do. What I should have done, according to the hostile training, is gone down on my hands and knees. But I knew what these guys had been up to and what they were doing to people that went down on their hands and knees, and I just thought, I'll take the spear and the bullet over what else the alternative, because you're probably going to get the spear and bullet afterwards anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that's just like that's part of us growing up where we grow up. You know what I mean? It is, isn't it? That's an Essex reaction.
We're in Shoreditch, and I grew up around this area. And it was,
do you know what I'm saying? But what I'm trying to say to you is,
I don't quite remember it quite as bad as that.
Well, it wasn't like that. But if someone is going to be aggressive to you, and your only way out is the best form of defence. Sometimes it's not always. I've many and more times have I turned and run or walked away, in a positive way, than tried to fight back or confront. And also, it worked out in our favour, luckily. And also, you think that I was brave, or people say, oh, that was brave, or you were stupid, you were mad. Think about the cameraman. He had a gun in his back, and he's looking through a matchbox in black and white.
What's Ross doing here?
Yeah, and he carried on rolling. He could have stopped, right?
I think you've done 120 of them, and I know before we sat down, you're still doing stuff like this.
Yeah, I know, and I love it. I mean, I did a bit of acting last year. For Channel 5. I then went off and made a documentary in La Picota prison in Colombia, which is really interesting. Sadly, that's not going to see the light of day, but that's part what happens in my job. So it was a lot of risk for little reward. And then I did a game show called Bridge of Lies, which is in its third series.
Yep.
And then I went off and made 5 programs about organised crime groups, very famous ones around the world, which was fascinating and quite, perilous in terms of the fact that you really don't want to piss these people off if you can help it. So I have been as fair and as understanding as I can be to the plight of what they do, and also
worldwide, or
yeah, I mean, started off in the UK, looking at the effect in the UK, and then North America, South America, then into Spain, and then across Europe to Italy, and then back home.
Moving away from this, I'll come back to this in a while, but just moving away from this, you and I have spent some nice times on the golf course, some nice restaurants, and at other times drunk far too much.
Definitely.
But,
and long may that remain so.
Well,
I haven't played golf in 5 or 6 years. I was pretty. I mean, you're a good golfer. I tell you what. I think I question whether I'm more lethal with an AK-47 or with a 9-iron.
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
I always looked at you and then thought that you would make a really good politician.
Thank you very much.
Is that something that's on your radar?
I've always been. I was interested in politics. I was very lucky to have been. I've met a few prime ministers along the way and a few politicians. I think there's a massive mistrust of politicians in this country right now, and they do seem pretty disconnected across the board. I think as a political class, from any party, I would say there's been a disconnect with the British public in recent years. And so, yes, it's something that interests me, but I've got 4 kids, and I've got a mortgage, and I've got a lot of other things going on. But I don't think you should ever rule out anything in your life. The moment that you rule out anything, particularly in my line of work, but you said no, da-da-da-da-dee. So with something as serious as that, I'm never going to rule it out, but I don't see it coming any day soon.
Well, you and I have chatted briefly on what Blighty Talks Bricks is about.
Yeah.
I know you got some views on it. What's your take on what I class as the housing crisis we have today and the shortage?
I think it's not what you class it. It is one. I think there's a deficit of some 300,000 properties in the UK. It's possibly more than that. But if you look back historically, apart from certain times, just pre the Second World War and after the Second World War, when we had to build because of the Blitz and because of the bombing in other parts of the UK, and the fact that the relationship between central government, regional government, councils at grassroots there's always been a disconnect. It's never seemed to work together. And look, we had new towns close to where you grew up, where I grew up, and the thing about a new town, people might knock them, but they at least had an infrastructure that based around them. Wanting to suddenly build 70 new homes where there is only schools and NHS facilities for the people that exist there, and sometimes there's not enough for the people that already live in that area.
Yep.
If you're going to build more houses, you have to take into account that it needs to be organised at a very high level. And that means that government has to put first foot forward, and they have to organise the way that you build houses and make it easier for people in your position and people that build houses to be able to do so. But also I look at, the 250,000 properties that are vacant in the UK. And you look at cities like Liverpool. When I used to go out with a girl from Liverpool and was up there quite a lot, and you used to see these massive, beautiful properties that were just empty, that were laying there. And I also go up to Glasgow quite a lot, and there are some stunning properties up there that are just empty. So, we need 300,000 houses, but there's some very large properties that could be converted into sociable or affordable housing, or even top-notch, whatever you want to call it, whatever's applicable. So it would take some of the burden off. And also, one thing I do worry about is that, you can't just build a house like that. They say it has to last 70 years. Well, the house that I live in has been standing for 250 years, and hopefully will stand another 250 years, long after I've left the planet.
Yep.
And I think that's the way that we should be looking about it, not just in terms of sustainability, in terms of, what is its rating, how what's its ecological, position. It's also its durability. Because if you build one house and it lasts a generation or 3 generations or 4 generations or 5 generations, then that is sustainability.
How do we change the views? I mean, I've had a number of people on this podcast now. Most people, whether they're in the industry or not, agree that we've got a problem, but we can't seem to change. Our governments are voted in by us. Mm-hmm. How do we change? How do we change our mentality to say we do need more property? We've got to look at this, because nobody wants it next to them, do they?
I was just about to say NIMBY, and I'm possibly one of them as well.
I'm one of them as well. At times, yeah, I get it.
And I think you have to be very honest about that if you're going to talk about it. What it takes me back is I think, there are certain cities, that are more desirable, mainly because you get paid more money in those cities, and a redistribution, we were talking about levelling up. I don't see any levelling up. I've not seen any levelling up whatsoever. The money follows the money, and the people follow the money.
Yeah.
I think I'm not saying I wouldn't particularly be in favour of taxing the super rich at 90%. You're just going to get a brain drain. That's never going to work. But what I think we need to think about is how we restructure, like the big companies, the Amazons, the ones that employ lots of people, and you say, well, yeah, you can build a new factory here, but what you do as part of it, you make an allowance for housing for people that come to work with you. You don't ask people to commute fast journeys or long journeys, and you make sure that there is an infrastructure around. If you're going to build a factory for 20,000 people, then you make sure that the National Health Service are involved, the transport services are involved, and also policing, all the different drains that human beings naturally take on a society. They have to be thought about before you give permission to somebody who turns over billions and billions and billions of pounds in profit, and rightly so, they deserve it. Yeah. But part of making that profit, there should be a responsibility to their workforce to make sure that they are not scrabbling for teachers, for health, and other forms of welfare.
Well, I think...
Is that a bit obvious? That's a bit simplistic.
Well, no. Well, I think sometimes keeping something simple is the right way out of the problem. And what you've explained there, I think it's a great audition for you to become a member of Parliament, if I'm honest. I mean, it's very well put. And that honesty bit, Yeah,
well, that's something that we all. I mean, that comes with age as well, doesn't it? I mean, I think we're all, when we were younger, we were all a little bit, I don't know, not dishonest, but we were. The eye was on the prize at all costs. And I think as you get older and you have kids, you realise that the world doesn't centre around you; it centres around so many other things.
Talking about other things,
go on, mate.
Charities.
Yeah, obviously because of my time, I think I spent more time than any so-called journalists who ever went out to Afghan. It had a profound effect on my life. It changed me forever. What I saw there in terms of the bravery of our armed forces and other countries, what I saw in terms of the bravery of the Taliban, and what I saw in terms of the suffering of the people of Afghanistan changed me fundamentally. And so I'm an ambassador for the Royal British Legion. I am patron of Help for Heroes, which I've been for many, many years. And I've also stepped into Barbara Windsor's shoes as ambassador for the RBL. So I've done that for seven years.
The RBL is what?
Royal British Legion, my friend.
Okay.
Very important. Poppy appeal to some. And also my local hospice, Thames Hospice, which is also, I was asked to help out there when I first moved into where I live now, on the Bucks borders, and it's just an amazing institution. And that's the great thing about, or the saddest thing about dying, or the greatest thing about dying, if there is a great thing about it, is it doesn't take into account how much money you've got in the bank account.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't take into account whether you're a goodie or a baddie, or whether you're indifferent. It's going to happen to all of us. And there isn't really the resources to look after everybody in the way that they should be looked after, as far as I'm concerned. So, Thames Hospice relies on a lot of charity. I'm doing a talking gig to raise money. I'm doing 2 actually coming up, and just get people to come in and they buy a book, and the money from the book sales goes to the hospice. So,
well, that's lovely. And the industry, something that the public don't realise on this podcast is about is the house building industry does a lot for charity.
Oh, masses, mate. I'm aware of that. I know what you've done over the years. How many marathons have you run in the other day?
Only 6. 6.
Mate, that's 6 more than most people. It's 5 more than me.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Remember that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, I do. I remember
fact,
you and I trying to catch up, but you needed a wee and I didn't want a wee. So I had to leave you. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Around the Isle of Dogs it was.
Yes, mate.
Yeah,
God,
I remember
those days.
Talking about running, I mean, I used to run to help my mind. I struggle a bit with my emotional well-being, as you know, and we've chatted upon this in the past. All of the terrible things that you've seen, how do you, because to me, you are a man's man, but I know the soft side to you as well. I do know that.
Of course I think we're all a bit like that, aren't we? We have more than one side to us. We're not one dimensional.
How do you cope with your anxiety challenge? Is there something?
Oh, I have lots of different tricks. One of them was to get blind drunk, which doesn't help ultimately.
That doesn't help.
Which I've done with you. Yeah, we've tried that a few times. That doesn't really help, particularly as you get older, because you're just resilience. You've got no resilience to that. Doesn't mean I don't come home after a bad day and crack open a glass of Pinot Noir or a bottle of Pinot Noir and fill a glass or two, or have a beer. But I think talking is the most important thing you can do. Yeah. We know from a lot of research into PTSD, the sooner you talk about something that is affecting you, the less chances of it developing into true PTSD, which is a very easy term, but actually relates to an incredibly varied, or has now become a saying for an incredibly very different amount of psychological issues that people can have as a result of being in a trauma situation. But we use trauma risk management on the ground, which is basically talking. It's what we used to do when we were hunter-gatherers and we gathered around a fire at the end of the day. We probably got up and danced a bit more than we dance these days.
Oh, I'm a terrible dancer.
Looked to the moon and howled at it, but we'd eat meat together and then we'd have a conversation in whatever the language of the time was. And that's ultimately what it is. It's like everybody will see, if it's a road traffic collision, whether it's bullets being fired at you, whether it's interviewing someone whose son was chopped up to try and find out where the drugs were, and that can be often very emotional and have an effect on you. All those different examples, I would make sure that the team, which is very small, cameraman, soundman, and me, director most of the time, sometimes not a sound man, we would sit down and we discuss what the events of the day. If we're in a country that doesn't want alcohol, then we do it over tea or water. If we're in a country where they allow you to have a beer, we'll probably have a beer or two, and we'll just discuss the day and decompress, and that's really important. I also carry a piece of wood around my neck wherever I go, which sounds pathetic.
Really?
Yeah.
I just thought you had a bad taste in jewellery.
Careful what you say. My wife will find you. So there's no metal. There's no wood inside an armoured personnel carrier or a helicopter, and I've been in both of those when they've crashed. And I'm being strung upside down, and had sparks going past my eyes, going, we're just going to disappear in a ball of flame in a minute, or where RPGs were being struck off the side of this thing while it was upside down in a gorge, and I'm going, I touch wood, I want to touch some wood, I couldn't touch any wood. So that sounds pathetic.
No, it doesn't.
Right?
It doesn't at all.
But it actually, that moment of touching wood is sort of taking my mind out of the impending doom. It's going, that strength, that's my inner strength. I will use that strength now to get me through this situation. And, when I used to play rugby, I used to make sure I used to lace my left boot up before I laced my right boot
I'm
up.
right.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Silly things like that. You find some of the best sportsmen, and we all believe in Mr. Gary Players, the more I practice, the luckier I come. But there's also that little bit of edge that you're looking to find. And sometimes it's the way that you prepare before you play the match. It's like, it's a mixture of different things. But ultimately, it's about talking things through and knowing why you're there and the reason that you're doing it. If you can answer those questions, and as I always say, just take what you need, not what you want.
Well,
you can be all right. You live all right.
You started pretty much early doors with that. I knew this time was going to fly. I've always loved your company. I know that Andy, who's sitting over there, we've always had great times. We're great mates. We don't probably see as much of each other as we'd like because we're busy. But I know you as that hard man, not just being in EastEnders, but I also know you've got that amazing soft side. You have carried on what we have on this podcast, which is just lovely human beings.
Yeah, my friend.
I always find when I leave your company, A, I've got a hangover, and B, but I'm always happier. I just really want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, mate,
I really do suggest people get a copy of this. It's one great read.
Thanks,
it's I've enjoyed it so much, but not as much as I've enjoyed your company
Love
today.
you, mate.
Thank you very much for your
Always
time.
will. We're friends forever.
Appreciate that. Viewers, listeners, season 3, episode 1 comes to an end. I just want to thank this man for his time. I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have. It's been amazing sitting here talking to my old buddy. Look after yourselves. Take care. Many thanks.